Hello, hello, and welcome back to Compassionate Chingonas Speak. And today we're going to talk about shamanism. And there was a suggestion that we speak about the guy who called himself a shaman at the insurrection or the insurrection at the Capitol. And we all know he's been on news, he's been on social media, and he wore the horns and the fur. And talk about triggering a chingona. That guy very much triggered me. And my first impulse was, that idiot. I wanted to shred him. And how dare him call himself a shaman. And then my second thought was, well, when he's in prison, all that shamanism that he thinks he has, well, we'll see, this is where the metal to the pedal or whatever, this is where he will deal with that reality of what he thinks shamanism is. Let's see how it works for you in a prison. And those are my thoughts on this guy. And I have to say that in my teachings, it was brought up to me that there's a very, very fine line between shamanism and insanity. There's a continuum there. And if we are not congruent, and if we do not know ourselves as a person walking the spiritual path, it will bite us in the ass. And so often I hear a lot of New Agers that they feel like this is a cliche, or they like to put this label on themselves without the discipline. And there's times where I've walked into a room of people who call themselves shamans, and my first impulse is they all have their heads up in the clouds and nobody's grounded into the earth. There's no grounding at all. There's all this love and light, and but they don't realize that there is dark and light that has a shaman you have to recognize. It's not an easy road. And that's why when we are taught the protocols, because what shamans are people who are in between the worlds, they're in between the physical world and the spiritual world. And if you're not schooled and mentored in a way that you know yourself, it could really bite you in the ass, because when you enter that spiritual world, you better know who you are. And I'll leave it with that, and I will pass the baton over to my sister Jennie, and we'll get your thoughts on the guy with the bull horns.
Well, I think he's an asshole. Sorry. I was really very upset with that, because what he was doing was ridiculing something that has been here for ages and ages. There was no respect there. He went there to make a mockery of what people have been learning for many years, what people respect. And yes, Lorraine, when you work in the medicine world, you do walk between two worlds. And when he was saying, he was a shaman, and he went up there, I'm sure people are thinking, oh yeah, they're all crazy. And that's not what it was. He had no respect. He is not a shaman. It's like when this man had this thing in Arizona, he was charging people $10,000 each to go in a sweat lodge. And then he put this goddamn tarps over it. And then, I think 10 people died. And then he said, well, the Native Americans have been doing this for hundreds of years. Yes, they have, but they didn't have plastic and they didn't put tarps over that. So what they do is they take away what they want and they incorporate into their oh, we're shamans and this is how we do it. No, you're not. You're nothing but a goddamn liar. You've not studied it. You don't respect it. You don't even respect yourself. What they're going for is, they're trying to make people go, wow, look at that man. He had horns on and he had all this, I don't know, paint on, whatever the shit he had on, and fur. That's ridiculous. Was he a goddamn buffalo? Even a Tonka would have bit him in the ass. He should be ashamed of himself. And I can hardly wait till he goes to prison. And Jake in state prison will see what he can do. Maybe he can levitate or something or float. I don't know. But how dare he do that? And how dare he bring that shame onto, I'm a shaman. There's so much behind that. There's so much faith in that. That hurt my feelings, that if anybody really believed that's what he was, then you're as sick as he is, because he certainly was not a shaman. And I could probably go on and I would probably cuss. So I'm going to send this over to Cynthia. That was not a shaman. That was a piece of nerd. Oh.
Thank you, sisters. And first of all, let me just start off by saying I am not a shaman. However, my two sisters here are. And the way that you can tell if people are shamans or not, a true shaman doesn't even call themselves a shaman, because they are humble. And it's a combination. So for me, my take on shamanism is, it is a spiritual doctor, for lack of a better word. So people use a lot of different terms. People say shamans, people say medicine man or woman, people say curandero or curandera. And so there's a lot of different words that are used, but basically it, in my interpretation, is somebody that has reached a level of spirituality and consciousness. And like Lorraine said, they go between two worlds. So they bring the other world here for healing, and healing in so many different ways. Sometimes they use plant medicines, sometimes they use a lot of different modalities. But let's just be clear, shamanism is not only just learning about it, but in many times, from my experience, it's been people are born into shamanism. These are gifts that are passed down by generations, by the ancestors. And one of my pet peeves is when you see these people that are not native or not indigenous, and all of a sudden, oh, I'm a shaman because I took a weekend retreat with somebody and now that makes me a shaman. No, that doesn't make you a shaman. It's a process. People that shamanism is learned over years and years and years. Like Lorraine said, it's a discipline. And like I said, many times, you're actually selected by the ancestors, and that's how it's passed on. And a lot of times my experience has been, it's usually passed on by your grandmother. It could be grandfather, but a lot of times it's the grandmother, and these gifts are passed down. So to me, when I saw this guy who called himself the Q-Anon Shaman, I was offended. That's disrespectful. That's disrespectful. And obviously he's not a shaman. And it really gives the true shamans a bad reputation. So let's distance ourselves. He's not a shaman. It's a very valuable practice that our medicine women here have. And again, they just didn't become shamans when they were young. It's a process. So I think shamanism is sacred. I think shamanism should be respected. And I may have a master's degree from school, but these two women have their PhDs in shamanism and spirituality. And I have so much respect for these women, because it's a life practice. It's a dedication. It's not just something you get, can get a certificate in the mail. So that's my thoughts on shamanism. And I'll pass it over to a true shaman, my medicine woman sister, Lorraine.
Thank you, ladies. I think both of you covered everything that that we could say in 10 minutes, because shamanism, we could go on we can speak about it for hours, but we were very succinct, and I thank you, Cynthia, for your words, and Jenny for your words, because it hits very close to the heart. And I just want to end with that the most powerful shamans that I've ever met were those that were on a healing path for themselves. And when we see otherwise, we should look at the red flags. When somebody calls themselves a shaman, that's a red flag. And we'll leave it there. And good night, everybody. And come back next week. We will be talking about sex. Oh, okay, it's open. If you have any suggestions, put it on our post and we'll talk about it. The Chingona way.
Yeah, that's the tough way.